what people want to hear about. So I'm going to give it a little longer to just see if some more people are going to join in. And in the meantime,
Yes.
could you say a little bit more about yourself and how did you even get interested in this area specifically?
Oh, it has many years. I started when I was very young. Uh, I'm working with data technology for more than 20 years. The first, besides Microsoft Access, of course, the first data server database that I worked with was SQL Server 6.5.
All right.
So
All right.
yeah, a long time ago, long time ago. So it was natural to evolve until Fabric, and Fabric is a very good surprise. Uh, it allows us to implement some architecture that we were only thinking about, and they were very difficult to implement, but we can implement in Fabric.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. And how did you then go from the SQL Server?
How I moved from SQL Server to Fabric?
Yes, and Power BI and the journey in between.
Yeah, yeah, because many years ago when it was SQL Server 7, Microsoft started to launching the BI set of tools that they have until today. And in opposite to other providers, they released these tools free together, SQL Server, and got to love the data analysis area, the BI area, building data warehouses with the tools. At that time, it was called OLAP Server. And then
Right.
things get evolving, evolving. I remember when Power BI were only a set of plugins, add-ins inside Excel. Then Microsoft joined the add-ins and became Power BI. And now it
I
evolved
remember
to
that.
Fabric. Yes.
Very good. So I tried to set the settings so that everybody now can join in from whoever has joined in on the meeting, because actually a lot of people have signed up. And I'm seeing now that we have about 10 participants, so I think we should give it a little bit longer. In the meantime, maybe I can take some of the intros and practicalities, such as that we will be recording this session. And so anybody who does not want to have their questions or any parts recorded, they should not take part in the session. We will also be putting the recording out on YouTube in a week or two from now. And of course, you'll get to just see it. Then it's before that we do this. And in addition to this, we of course want everybody to be pleasant and polite and respectful of everybody here and all the users. So please make sure that you keep the tone good and nice so that we all can have a very good and enjoyable session. Now that was just some of the practical parts. Then of course, Dennis, I'm very happy to have you here. You're a very seasoned data platform specialist from Malta. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm living in Malta. I'm in fact Brazilian living in Malta.
All right. And you have more than 2 decades of experience working with SQL Server and software development. So that's also very impressive. Very few of those out there. And in addition to this, you're also very well known in the community. You have also participated in DevSQL past chapter in Rio de Janeiro. You're taking part in the MD Park Pass in Malta, and you have an impressive array of certifications. Could you mention just a few of all the certifications that you have?
Azure Solution Architect, DevOps Architect, Data Platform Engineer, Associate, and the recent one, Fabric Engineer Associate.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a lot. Any tips on how you actually get the time to both prepare and take all these certifications?
Well, when you are starting, you really need some time to prepare, to get the first, the second. After this point, if you are working with the tool, it becomes something natural. And the tools get evolving, and one tool evolving over another so often that your previous knowledge from previous studies still help you to get additional certification. So once you are working with the tool, getting certified becomes easy. And the best in relation to get certified is not exactly to go too much after the certification. The certification is a process. Some companies ask for certification, but not all companies ask for certification. What's important in relation to this is that during the process to get the certification, you learn so much about the tools that you are studying for that certification that this knowledge is visible when you are talking to someone that knows the same subject. So the knowledge becomes visible in an interview with a company, for example, and so on.
I couldn't agree more. So much of the learning is from the preparation and from the learning. Good. So before we move on to the next slide, I also just want to mention that we have several more cool meetups coming up in this month. I know that on the 27th, we will be looking into analytics here in the Microsoft Fabric user group. So that's another good one to sign up for. In addition to looking at that, we're also going to look at data engineers with Microsoft Fabric, and that will then be on Sunday, April 28th. And on the same Sunday, April 28th, we also look at process mining with Power Automate, which can be combined with actually pulling out different files from Fabric. So this is going to be very, very exciting for those of you who would like to join in on that. So in 2 weeks' time, we have a double up on sessions. So, but from now, I just want to say, take it away, Dennis, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. I am excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. So let's start. First, before jumping into the content, I will leave my contacts here. Anyone who would like to get in touch, it will be a pleasure to stay connected on social media. Just save the screen or get on the recording later, and it will be a pleasure to stay in touch. Okay, this is the slide about recording. So let's talk about source control in Power BI and Fabric. How the source control works in Power BI and Fabric, and how can we develop a development life cycle using source control with Power BI and Fabric. First important thing, what Git tools should we use to work with Power BI and source control? So we have many Git tools possible to use: Git Bash, Visual Studio, and Visual Studio Code. These are some possibilities for us to use. Why I'm not including Power BI Desktop? Unfortunately, Power BI Desktop doesn't provide yet the features to make the management of the source control of a source control repository. So when you are working on your desktop with Power BI Desktop, you need to choose one or more than one of these tools to help you work with source control. If you are used to Git, you can choose Git Bash. You already know about Git Bash. If you are not used to Git, probably Git Bash is not your best option because Git Bash is totally on command prompt. Still, you may need to use Git Bash sometimes to make the initial clone of a repository. For example, I'll make this demonstration. I prefer to make the initial clone of a repository using Git Bash than use Visual Studio Code. If you already use Visual Studio for some reason, already have Visual Studio in your machine, then it works. And it's an interesting option for you. If you don't have Visual Studio in your machine and you are not used to it, then Visual Studio is too big. Is an elephant, let's say like that. So it's too much to make this source control with Power BI. So the better tool becomes Visual Studio Code. It's your best friend. It's lightweight, but it may require some tweaks with source control, and it may require use of Git Bash. For example, I prefer to make the initial clone of the repository using Git Bash than trying to use Visual Studio Code for that. So Visual Studio Code is your friend. You can open a folder where you have your Power BI files, and it will show you if you have some changes on local repository, show you the files, and show you the branch that you are using. So it's your friend when managing the source control with Power BI. Power BI Desktop, like I said, unfortunately can't manage source control yet. Soon, I hope it will be capable to do so. So the first step, we need to have a repository. We need to have a repository where we'll hold our code. This repository needs to be Git compatible. We can use GitHub, we can use Azure DevOps, or any other Git compatible repository we choose. Yes, question?
Sorry. So, like, when we're kind of using like some slightly different tech stack, like Databricks or something like that, do you think there might be the possibility of doing source version control via those platforms, or do we definitely need to transition to Fabric?
I don't think Microsoft will invest too much in include source control in Azure Databricks, but we can never be sure. It may be possible or not. Difficult to say, but probably it will transition to. I would recommend a transition to Fabric for a more complete development life cycle. Even so, consider that many of the features related to source control, they are only starting. They are newborn features. Once you go deeper, you feel that, oh, there is something missing here and there. Yes. It's already possible to keep a deployment lifecycle, but you may miss some features even on Fabric. Even on Fabric. And the initial procedure in relation to the repository may be a bit different depending on your choice. For example, Visual Studio Code can easily make a clone of GitHub repositories. But I don't like how Visual Studio Code works with DevOps repository. I mean, not on the clone action. I prefer to clone a DevOps repository using Git Bash. So I clone the DevOps first, and later I start saving the Power BI content inside the repository. Let me make a demonstration about this. So, I have a repository here. Demarc demo. This repository is using the main branch and has only a README file. And I have a folder, Demarc, which is completely empty. So the first task I need to do is to clone my repo Demarc demo to this folder Demarc Git. So I use git bash for that. As I said, the initial clone I prefer to make with git bash. I'm not saying that it's not possible to do with Visual Studio Code, but it's a preference. So cd c Denmark git then git clone. I need the folder. To the local folder. Okay, let me open a tool here for Zoom, and you can see better what I wrote. So git bash is completely command prompt. So in this case, I only got into the folder and I'm making a git clone, getting the address of my repository and cloning to the local folder because I already need. Okay. So cloning the repository from the server to my local environment. Once done, we can see the .git folder and the readme.md, which was already inside the repository. Okay, so I cloned the repository is on my local machine. So I have Git keeps a repository on my local machine, so I can make commits and make changes on my local machine and make source control on my local machine, and then synchronize with the remote repository on DevOps. Let's start with a Power BI file. Here I have a Power BI file, which is typically a PBIX. But there are a few challenges related to using a PBIX. The problem to use a PBIX is this file is binary. So it becomes difficult to use a binary file with source control. The PBIX is in fact a big zip file. A big zip file with many other files inside. If you try to change the extension of a PBIX to zip and open, you'll discover what is inside the PBIX. It contains many information and it contains data as well. You load your data, especially if you are using import mode, you load your data to inside your report file when using the import mode. So it's possible that the PBIX contains data, and usually we don't save data inside source control. We should not save data inside source control. So these are some challenge in relation to the source control with Power BI. How do we solve this? We create what is called a Power BI project file. Power BI project file. This feature is considered still in preview, so it's always good to remind that you need to go to Options, Preview Features, and locate the Power BI project feature. Otherwise, you can't work with this kind of files. So you need to enable this on the preview features list. Besides that, a bit after Microsoft released the PBIP files, Microsoft also made the semantic models to become with the TMDL format, which makes the semantic models to be easier to read. So this is a related feature that saves the semantic model with the TMDL folder, TMDL format. Okay, so let me save. This is originally saved as a PBIX. You can see here. It's originally a PBIX, but on Power BI, I use Save As, choose the folder where I made the clone. This is the clone of my repository. And I'll choose the format PBIP. So Power BI project file. So I save this PBIX as PBIP to manage it in source control. It's working, saving. So just a few more seconds and you have the PBIP. It's really, let's say, writing in a different format the content of my PBIX. Done. So let's see what format is this. One very interesting point is that the PBIP, although it exists as a file, it is. The PBIP is here as a file. It exists as a file. However, the content is not entirely inside the PBIP. The PBIP is only a reference file. The entire content that I had on my PBIX was saved in different folders. One folder for the semantic model and one folder for the report. Each object which will be included in my Power BI workspace will become a folder. This is valid as well for the Fabric object. A Fabric notebook will become a folder. A Fabric pipeline will become a folder. Every object which I synchronize with the source control will become a folder inside the source control. Inside the folder, we have the definition of the object and some additional files related to the content of the object. Here it is. So inside the semantic model folder, on the definition, we see here the semantic model is saved as TMDL format. So the semantic model is saved as TMDL format. The TMDL format usually is easier to read than the original format. It's easy to read and understand what the model contains. So we can see here, for example, the model contains 3 tables. So the semantic model is saved on TMDL folder. The report has a specific format, a report JSON, which is used to save the report. And this is evolving. As I will show you in a few moments, there are some recent changes to this format. This format is a bit different and it is evolving every day. Some details that I was about to show on the PowerPoint, they don't match these files. They are a bit different. But we can note that both of them have a .platform folder. .platform file. Power BI needs a file inside these folders to understand how Power BI will represent these objects inside the workspace. What this folder is? This folder is a notebook, is a report. What this folder is? So the .platform file points to this. And inside the semantic model, we have this .pbi folder, and we have a file cache ABF with 500 megabytes. This file is huge. Yes, because this is where my data is related to the import mode. So the data was saved as well. What will prevent this data to go into the source control? The git ignore. When we use source control, when we use git, there is a git ignore file that prevents some local settings to go into the source control. And one of the local information, which is never uploaded into source control, is our data cache. It doesn't go into source control. Okay. So on the PowerPoint, the Power BI project file. So it's built to support source control, breaks the content in multiple files folder, includes the git ignore. And the moment that I saved the file as PBIP, it saved the git ignore for us. It built the git ignore for us. The data is included in a special cache file, which is avoided by the git ignore. The git ignore don't allow the cache file to be included in the repository. So this is the first level, the folders, the git ignore, and the PBIP. The cache file, cache ABF, and then the dataset definition on TMDL, saved on TMDL file. This image is what I said. Microsoft is always evolving this. This is a preview feature. Microsoft is always evolving. Just a few days, I'm talking about days ago, to make the representation of a folder inside the workspace, Microsoft was using two files, item config JSON and item metadata JSON. These two files were used. You can see at this moment when I save these files that these two files don't exist anymore. They were replaced by a .platform file. This is a matter of a few days, a change which happened a few days ago. Okay, so the item config JSON, I would illustrate that it was representing what the folder is not anymore these files. It's the .platform file. Okay, and the git ignore, ignoring files which are intended to be local. Okay, let's publish this to a repository. How will I publish this to a repository? Let's use Visual Studio Code. As I mentioned before, Visual Studio Code is our friend in relation to source control. So I can open a folder, open folder, and point to the folder where I saved my PBIP. So the mark git. So this folder is linked to the source control environment. Yes, I trust these files. Okay. So it identified the files and it identified that this folder is linked to source control. So in source control, it already showed to us that all these files are completely new. All these files are completely new in the repository. So I can put a message. First version of report and commit. Mind what appears on the status bar of the Visual Studio Code, which tells me which branch I am using. I am using the main branch. So here the main branch is the branch where I'm committing this. But I'm not committing to the repository yet. I'm not committing to the repository yet. I mentioned this. I have a local repository. Once I cloned the repository, I have a local repository. So the action of committing is local. I'm saving the changes, but locally, on my local repository in my local machine. So if I want to send the files to the repository on Azure DevOps in this example, I need to make a sync. Here on Visual Studio Code is called a sync, but in fact it can also be called as a push. I'll be doing a push. This button is called sync because this button does both actions. The pull to get any eventual changes that the repository has while I was working locally, and the push to send my changes to the repository. So this button makes both actions, and it's done. If I go to the repository, make a refresh, there it is. So my files are now located in Azure DevOps. So there it is. I have my files located inside a source control environment. Okay, so once we did this, let's talk about the source control cycle. Let's start to see the cycle step by step. I have the repository with a branch called main. I have the workspace on the Power BI portal. Okay, but what I did, the first thing I did here was to clone the main to my local environment. So the main is cloned to my local environment. Then I made updates over the main. And with these updates, I made a commit. The commit is local, is a local action. I'm committing to my local repository. Then, after having committed to my local repository, I make a push to the Git repository. And as I mentioned, the sync action Visual Studio Code makes both actions together. Both actions, I mean, push is sending my changes to the Git repository. And pull is getting any eventual change on the Git repository back to my local repository. Okay. Now let's make the initial configuration of the workspace. I need to link the workspace with the Git repository. The workspace is not linked to the Git repository yet. So I need to make this link, which will result on the initial branch checkout. Let me show an example of this, then we get back to the best practice. I have here the Power BI portal, and I have a workspace created for this task, DMARC Prod. Let's consider this the workspace related to a production environment. Then I go to the workspace settings, Git integration on the workspace settings, and I make the link with my DevOps environment. In this example, I choose the organization, I choose the project and the repository, and finally the branch. I will link the DMARC prod with the branch main. There is a text box here asking me for a Git folder. Git folder? Why would I link this with one specific folder? Well, let's imagine a possibility. Let's imagine that my project is bigger And my Fabric objects, either Power BI or Fabric objects, they are only a piece of a bigger project. In this case, maybe I would like to have everything on my repository and the Fabric object would be inside a specific folder. So we have the possibility to link one workspace in Power BI to a specific folder in the repository. This is possible. Is it good to do? Let's talk more about this in a moment. Connect and sync. So I'm connected to the Git repository and it started syncing. It means that Power BI portal by itself is getting the content of the Git repository and getting into the workspace. It's like Power BI creates a local repository for itself. In the way I cloned the repo, Power BI is cloning the repo for the portal and putting the content inside the workspace, and there they are. There they are with the semantic model. If I try to open the report, it's completely blank. Why my report is completely blank? My report is completely blank because the data, the ABF with the cache data file was not included in the repository. So it never syncs to the Power BI environment, to the Power BI portal. Let me check the authentication to see if everything is okay with the data source credentials. It seems that everything is okay. Okay, updated the credentials and then back to the workspace. Then I need to refresh the data set. I need to make a refresh on the data set to be able to see some data on the report. While the data set is refreshing, let's get back to the PowerPoint. And let's see, talk about best practice. What you can do. We saw that we can use a folder parameter when linking the workspace to the repository to include the Power BI objects as part of a bigger project. We can, technically. But what you should do, you should never mix Power BI objects or Fabric objects with other solution objects which have a different life cycle. Why? Imagine that I mix Power BI objects, for example, Fabric objects, with an Azure function that makes part of my solution. I'm mixing both. It's natural on a development life cycle that you have a development environment, I'll have a test environment, and I'll have a production environment. How I will promote the Azure function from development to test to production? We can make this on the source control. The source control has features for that, which is called a pull request between different branches. We can make pull requests between different branches to make the promotion. That's okay. But how do I promote the Power BI objects between dev, test, and prod? We never use pull request on source control to promote Power BI objects. When using Power BI objects, when using Fabric objects, we use deployment pipelines. So the life cycle is different. So the parts of a bigger project will have a different life cycle. Some I would like to promote using pull requests, while Fabric in Power BI needs to use a deployment pipeline in the Power BI environment. So you technically can put the Fabric or Power BI object in the same repository as a bigger project, together a bigger project. Technically you can, but it will fail at some moment. It will become a disaster when you start to promoting things and make a mix, because some objects you need to promote in one way, some in other. Then it will be very confused. So Power BI uses deployment pipelines for the lifecycle, while other objects use DevOps pull requests and DevOps pipelines to control the lifecycle. So it's a different type of lifecycle. So leave the Power BI and Fabric objects isolated in their own repository. This is a good practice. Leave them isolated in their own repository and use deployment pipelines to promote them between the lifecycle environment. Never use DevOps pull requests for that. About deployment pipelines, we may not have enough time to talk too much about deployment pipelines, but you can capture this image, this link, and there is a video. It's not so recent. It's not so recent. It's not talking about recent objects, but it explains how the deployment pipelines work. Now, let's talk about branching. So let me confirm the semantic model refresh finished. Yeah, semantic model refresh finished. I can open the report and I have my data there because my semantic model already finished the refresh. Okay. And here we are using the main branch. Is the branch that I linked on the workspace setting. And we can see here, we are using the main branch. What if I decide or to change the branch or to create a new branch? For example, let's consider an example. This is the production environment. I would like to create a test branch. I would like to create this test branch from the production branch. So how I do that? We can use the source control button. And here on the list of branches, we have the option check out new branch. Big attention to this new branch. New branch. The source control button only allows us to create a new branch. It don't allow us to change to another already existing branch. If I have another already existing branch, we need to change in a different way. The source control button only allows to create a new branch. Let's do that. I will create a new branch from the Power BI portal. I'm creating a new branch on my source control environment. Let's create the branch test. Checkout branch. Checkout is a technical term used in source control that is used when I'm getting a new branch, either creating or changing the current branch to another different branch. So the new branch is created. I check out a new branch. So I can check this on the source control. I'm seeing the main branch. I can change here and see that I have another branch called test. And the other branch called test already has the same content as the main branch. The test branch has the exactly same content as the main branch. Okay. Let's see what happens in my local environment. I'm still using the main branch. I see the files on the main branch. What if I would like to see the test branch? The test branch is not appearing here for me. It doesn't appear. There is an operation I need to do on my local environment to see something which was created on the source control side. It's an operation called, let me show here the options. It's an operation called fetch. Fetch means that I would like to see what new items, especially branches, created on the server side. Created or deleted. I want to see the changes on the source control side. So it's a fetch operation which is very fast. And then I can change from the branch main to the branch test. Let me close this and I'll change from the branch main to the test branch, which already appeared here because I did the fetch. So I'll make the change. Changing to an existing branch is also called checking out. So I'm making a checkout of the testing branch, but this time is an existing branch. On the folder, nothing tells me that I'm using the test branch. Then I can open the PBIP and I'm open the PBIP of the test branch, not of the main branch. So let's wait Power BI think a bit. And here it is, which seems to be the same report and data, but now I'm seeing the content of the test branch. Why it shows data? Should it show data? Yes, because the data is local to me. The data is never sent to source control or updated from source control. It's something that I have locally. So let me add here a text box. This is test. And let's increase this a bit. Okay. Okay. If I take a look on the source control, it already identified that I just made a change to the report. The Visual Studio Code already identified the report change and I commit this to get a message. Report test version. So I commit the report to get a message and sync to the server. Okay. What happens on the workspace now? Because the workspace is also using the test branch. We did a checkout on the test branch. What happens on the workspace? On the source control button, once I make a refresh here on source control, it immediately identifies an update on the report is required. Git status updated required because it identified the report was changed on source control. I have two tabs here, changes and updates. Updates is when an update is coming from the source control. And I can tell it, yes, okay, bring the update from the source control and update my report on the test environment. That's it. So it brought the change from the source control, updated the report on the test environment. I can open the report on the test environment, and this is test. The report on the test environment has the label "This is test," which I created on my local environment. Okay. I can see on the portal, on the workspace status bar, that I'm working with the test branch. On the status bar, it shows us you are working with the test branch. What if I would like to change? What if I would like to change this and start working with the main branch? I mentioned that I can change using the source control button to an existing branch. So if I would like to change the branch, I need to go back to workspace settings. Workspace settings, Git integration, and here on Git integration can change the branch which I'm using. So I'll change the branch to main branch. Switch and override. The meaning of the button. It means that we will switch to the main branch and we will override what is here. Is this important? At the moment, no, because all my objects are synced. This means all of them are saved in the repository on the test branch. But if any of them were marked as, for example, uncommitted, once I switch and override, I would lose changes. This is important to take a look and always mind the Git status of the objects. That's it. So now I'm again seeing the main branch on my Power BI environment. I can check the report again. And one more time, the report don't have the label. So I have two different environments to work with. I have the production environment where the label is not present, and I have the test environment where I created the label and save it to the repository. So we have two environments in this scenario. Let me change back to the test branch. Also, you close this Power BI file. So it's syncing, made the sync with the source control. I can open the report, for example, in Power BI, ask to edit the report. I'm editing on the branch test. Change the content. Now this is test 2. It's not test anymore, it's test 2. Okay, save the report. The report is saved. Once I get back to the workspace, in some moments it shows to me the report is uncommitted. What this means, uncommitted, the uncommitted status. This means that the report was changed in the portal and was not saved, was not committed to the source control yet. I have change made to this report directly in the portal, or directly in the portal, or publish it through the publishing command on Power BI Desktop. This could also cause this. The object is updated on the workspace, but not on source control. If I go to the source control button, see, the source control button is already advising me about that. I have one uncommented object telling me how many I have. One uncommented object which I can choose and commit to source control. That is it. So I just made the commit of this report to the source control on the branch test. Let's take a look on Visual Studio Code. I'm on branch test. I can ask to make a pull. A pull is when I want to get the most recent changes of files from the source control. Mind the difference between fetch and pull. Fetch is when I want to know what is there, but I don't want to get. I want to know what's there. I use it when I created a branch test there and I would like to see the existence of the branch. That's when I use a fetch. But a pull I use really to get the files inside the branch. So I'm using pull. Okay, done. And let's prove that this is updated. Let me open the PBIP again. While the PBIP is, oh, it's already opening. Okay. And there it is. The change made on the portal is already visible on my Power BI desktop. I can already see the change. This is test 2. This is test 2. Okay. Let's review these steps on the PowerPoint. So, this is where we stopped. I was synchronizing, making the initial synchronization with the workspace. Then I made a checkout of a new branch. I created the branch test on the Git repository. From the workspace, I created the branch test on the Git repository. For the branch test to be visible on the local repository, I made a fetch to make it visible. But then to change the branch from the branch main to the branch test, I made what's called a branch checkout. Branch checkout is an expression which can be used for new branches or for existing branches. Okay, some best practice. What you can do, we can change the current branch of the workspace as often as needed. I just illustrated how we can go to workspace settings and change the current branch of the workspace as we would like, as often as needed. Okay, that's good. That's good. We can change the current branch as often as needed. But the problem is we shouldn't. Why? Why we shouldn't? Because it's better to use different workspace for different branches. Why? Why is that? Because the change of the branch on the workspace settings is not on the user level. The change of the branch is for everyone working with that workspace. Imagine that your team have 5 developers, 5 Power BI developers working on the same project. And if the developers start changing the branch on workspace setting, it's just a matter of time till some developer not notice that the branch changed and they start to make change to an object in the wrong branch. It's just a matter of time. So when the branch is changed on workspace settings, it affects not a single user, but it affects all the users of the workspace. If you have a team of 5 developers, it will affect all 5 developers. So if you keep changing the branch on workspace settings, the developers will make errors, will not notice the change of branch, and errors will happen. So what's recommended is to use different workspace for different branches. Don't keep changing the branch on workspace settings because it's bad for the teamwork on the Power BI development lifecycle. Okay, more about this. I wrote a bit about this, about best practice related to source control. You can capture this image and take a look on what I wrote before. Okay. So branching from the workspace, we saw the example with the test branch. So let me make one more example. I'll create a new branch. Check out new branch. This time will be the development branch. Checkout branch. So I check out the branch development. I'm using the branch development. So I go to the report, edit the report in the portal, and I'll change this. This is development. Okay. Save the report. Close. And my report is uncommitted. So I changed the report, but I haven't committed the report yet. Okay, but I'll not do this now. Let's get back to Visual Studio Code. I'll make the fetch to see the development branch. Then I'll be capable to make the branch checkout for the development. However, there are changes on the portal which are uncommitted, but maybe the developer who is getting the development branch doesn't know that. So the developer opens the PBIP. So the developer opens the PBIP and decides to make a change on the PBIP. This is development 2. So I have a change on the PBIP on my local environment. We already saw how this works. We see the change. first development report. And then I commit, and push. So my change made locally to the branch development is already on the repository. However, on the portal, there are uncommitted changes to this report as well. What happens? The report changed on the workspace, but changed on the repository as well. What happens in this situation? It's advising that now we have a conflict. We have a conflict and we need to solve this conflict. We need to resolve this conflict to continue. So it's advising that there is a conflict between the inventory works. I can choose to undo my changes here. I can choose to update all from the repository, bringing the change from the repository to here. And considering that we have a conflict, it asks us, it's double checking to be sure that we know what we are doing. How we want to update this report? We want to accept the incoming changes or keep the current changes on the workspace. Let me say that I will accept the incoming changes. Are you sure? Yes, it asks twice, because this means that the changes done on the report on the workspace will be lost, and it will come from the repository. The new version will come from the repository. And the conflict is solved. The conflict is solved, so in this way we see that we can manage conflicts on the Power BI environment, on the online site, online portal. So we can manage conflicts here on the online portal. This is development 2. Okay. What we almost don't do anymore. You may have noticed that not even once I made a publish from Power BI Desktop. I had no need. I had no need to make a publish from Power BI Desktop. I control my work using source control. So I push, commit, push to the repository, then link the repository to the workspace. That's it. That's it. So linking the workspace to the repository brings out the objects. I don't need to keep publishing from Power BI Desktop. PBIX may become a format from the past. Once we need to put our projects in source control, we will stop using PBIX. We'll start using only PBIP. So PBIX will be something from the past. More about best practice architectural options. We can use together deployment pipelines. If we want to make the deployment of the objects from dev to test to prod, we need to use Power BI deployment pipelines. We need to use Power BI deployment pipelines. More than that, is extremely recommended that we start creating the pipelines with a single workspace, not with our 3 workspaces. Start creating the pipelines with a single workspace. This single workspace needs to be the development workspace. And then you promote the objects from development to test to production. In this way, the solution will work the development lifecycle will work. If you start with 3 pipelines which already have the same reports, you believe they are the same, with the same name, and put it in a deployment pipeline, it may become a mess. Because you will discover that the deployment pipeline don't match the objects only by name. It has an internal ID to match the objects. If the objects don't match by this internal ID, you are required to drop the objects and promote again. So don't start with 3 workspaces already filled with objects. Don't do that. You start with 1 development workspace and promote it to test and to production. Or there is the situation where your team is a single developer. The situation of a single developer is a completely different situation, because something that I told you not to do, a single developer can't do. Especially changing the branch. A single developer can easily change the workspace from one branch to another, and he will know which branch he is working with. Once you have more than 1 developer, you should stop that. Don't keep changing the branch on the workspace, in the portal. But a single developer can do that. And if you have a single developer managing, for example, the test environment, you can create multiple versions of tests. Why? To show different possibilities to your end user. Maybe your developers would like to show different possibilities to your end user. You could create different versions of the test with different branches. That's possible. There is the possibility that only the dev environment to be linked to the repository. Yes, it's possible. You can have only the dev environment linked to the repository. The others are not absolutely required to be linked to branch on the repository. They can be individual workspace, not linked to the repository. The promotion from dev to test to prod will happen with deployment pipelines. Deployment pipelines will make the promotion between the environments. Power BI manages the movement between the environments using the deployment pipeline. This is possible in relation to only have dev linked to the repository, but I like to have all 3 linked to the repository. Why? Imagine when I promote from dev to test. I'm making this promotion on Power BI. These are Power BI objects, the Power BI pipeline. What happens? When I promote from dev to test, all the objects on test will appear as uncommitted. They are not saved in source control yet. They were just promoted from dev. If my end user opens one of that report and says, no, that's not it I would like. That's not it. Make it different. It's not it how I would like it to be. We can just undo the changes on the test environment. We can undo the changes on the test environment and get the previous versions of the reports on the test environment back. With the deployment pipelines, we can't do that. Only with the deployment pipelines. The source control allows us to do that. To promote, leave uncommitted, waiting for the end user confirmation. When the end user confirms, you commit it to the repository. If the end user asks us, no, it's not this, put it back, so you revert the changes. The movement can be automated using DevOps pipelines. Can. But never automates it in the form of pull requests among the branches. Never. Don't do that. It will create a mess. What you can automate on DevOps pipeline, DevOps has objects for the pipeline, has action for the pipelines to promote a Power BI deployment pipeline stage to another stage. You can control the Power BI deployment pipeline from one stage to another stage through DevOps. This you can do through DevOps, but you should not use PR between branches with Fabric objects. The other environments can be linked for safe purpose. The test and the production environment, what I just explained. This allows you to undo changes after promoting, to let your user see the result and undo changes after promoting. Always start with a single workspace, what I said. In relation to the deployment pipeline, you start with the dev workspace, create a pipeline only over the dev workspace, then start promoting to test workspace and to production workspace. Don't start with all the workspace already containing the objects because the pipeline will complain. A single developer may still need source control, but the developer can check out branches in the portal at any moment because there is no team managing this. Future changes that I hope to see in relation to these features. Power BI Desktop with support to source control, so we don't need to go to Visual Studio Code anymore. So we could do these operations from Power BI Desktop. I hope to see this at some moment in the future. And Power BI Portal with a feature which allows user-level branch checkout. What do I mean? I mean that I'm working on a workspace, I make a checkout of one branch, and only me is seeing that branch. Only I am seeing that branch. This doesn't affect the other developers on my team. So a checkout that works on a user level and not for the entire team. Because in the way it is today, I gave you the recommendation, don't use branch checkout on the workspace. Don't keep changing branch on the workspace because your team will be